A leak, an argument, and an investigation. McLaren's unity, gone. Norris and Piastri under review. And before Austin, the truth finally surfaces. Every Formula One team lives by one unwritten law: trust the system, even when the system is under pressure. But inside McLaren, that system has begun to collapse. The investigation that now shadows the team didn't start with a dramatic confrontation. It started with something subtle: a series of irregularities buried deep in the race data after the Singapore Grand Prix. When engineers reviewed the telemetry, they noticed small discrepancies between the datasets stored on the two driver networks. The numbers didn't make sense. Lines of data had been accessed out of sequence, timestamps mismatched. At first, it looked like a glitch. But then someone asked the question no team ever wants to hear: who accessed this, and why? What followed was a chain reaction. Within hours, McLaren's internal security systems confirmed that an engineer from Norris's side of the garage had viewed a set of telemetry belonging to Piastri's car. It wasn't a massive leak. Nothing was sent outside the team. But it broke the one rule every Formula One team guards religiously: no one touches another driver's data without clearance. In most circumstances, it would have been handled quietly: a warning, a brief meeting, maybe a procedural reminder. But this time was different. Because this wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was happening after months of rising tension between two drivers already walking the edge of civility. Inside McLaren, the dynamic between Norris and Piastri has always been delicate. On paper, they represent perfect balance: experience and youth, emotion and precision, instinct and calculation. But as the season progressed, that balance began to distort. Norris, the face of McLaren's revival, carries the emotional weight of expectation: the homegrown star who stayed loyal when others left. Piastri, the methodical Australian, joined with nothing to lose and everything to prove. When the results began to tilt in his favor, so did the mood inside the team. Friendly competition became quiet rivalry. And in Singapore, that rivalry finally broke cover. The incident at turn 1 looked harmless: Norris clipped Piastri's rear tire, both continued, no penalty. But what the world didn't see was the aftermath. In the McLaren debrief room, words were exchanged. Sharp, professional, but cold. Piastri demanded to know why his strategy had been altered without consultation. Norris insisted he had no influence over pit decisions. The tension was undeniable. And when mechanics from each side of the garage stopped sharing setup notes, something they'd done all season, Stella knew the situation was slipping away. Still, he tried to manage it internally. Stella, known for his calm leadership, called both drivers into separate meetings, urging them to protect the team's image. He reminded them that McLaren's strength was its unity, that every disagreement was magnified under the spotlight. But by the time he'd finished those conversations, the data anomaly had already been discovered. What might have been a coincidence now looked like a symptom. If there was mistrust between the drivers, could it have spread to the engineering teams? That was the question that haunted him. And that's when Stella did something no one expected. He called in McLaren's legal and compliance department. That move changed everything. Formula One teams rarely involve legal oversight unless the issue is serious. Once the lawyers are in, the politics begin. The investigation, which started as a quiet audit, became formal. Every communication between the garages was reviewed. Every access log was analyzed. It wasn't about blame anymore, it was about containment. Stella wanted to know how deep the fracture went before it became visible to the public. But it was already too late. The story leaked within 48 hours. Someone inside the team, frustrated, maybe scared, spoke to a journalist. The words "internal investigation" hit social media before McLaren could react. And in a sport that thrives on perception, perception became truth. The paddock didn't see a technical audit, it saw scandal. And once that narrative takes hold, it's almost impossible to undo. Inside McLaren's headquarters in Woking, everything is measured: airflow, temperature, time, tone. But when Stella authorized the internal investigation, that precision turned against the team itself. Every access log was checked, every message reviewed, every terminal monitored. What had once been a symbol of McLaren's technological perfection suddenly became a courtroom. The engineers, the quiet minds behind the team's success, now found themselves under scrutiny. Not for what they'd built, but for what they might have seen. The first phase of the review focused on data access, but it quickly expanded into something bigger: culture. Investigators wanted to know how two engineering teams, working under the same roof, could become so divided without anyone noticing. The findings weren't criminal, they were psychological. Over time, subtle divisions had formed between the Norris and Piastri sides of the garage. It wasn't sabotage or hostility, it was identity. Mechanics and engineers naturally gravitated toward the driver they identified with most. Norris's side of the garage was louder, faster, emotional, a family built on passion and shared history. Piastri's side was quieter, more methodical, obsessed with precision. Each believed their approach was the key to McLaren's resurgence. Each believed the other side was holding them back. The problem is that Formula One doesn't tolerate dual philosophies. A car can't serve two masters, and neither can a team. When McLaren decided to treat both drivers equally, it unknowingly created two engineering factions fighting for one direction. That conflict became visible in the MCL39 itself. The car's development data showed inconsistencies, minor but telling. Updates optimized for one driver's style often destabilized the others. Norris's feedback demanded sharper turn-in and heavier front grip. Piastri's requested smoother rotation and balanced traction. The wind tunnel numbers agreed with both, which made it worse. Engineering perfection became political choice. Every change now risked being seen as favoritism. Andrea Stella tried to contain the damage through structure. He created a new oversight process called dual validation, meaning no performance change could be implemented unless both sides of the garage signed off on the data. It was meant to restore confidence. But instead, it slowed everything down. What used to take hours began taking days. Race weekend decisions became committee debates. McLaren, once praised for its lightning-fast upgrades and data precision, started losing its edge. Rival teams noticed. Red Bull's trackside engineers joked that McLaren had gone corporate. Ferrari's strategy director reportedly called it death by fairness. Inside Woking, the engineers called it something simpler: paralysis. The investigation only made that paralysis worse. To gather evidence, McLaren's compliance team installed new monitoring software across internal systems. Every data request, every file transfer, every telemetry pull was logged and flagged for review. It was necessary, but suffocating. Engineers who once stayed late into the night refining aero models now hesitated before accessing files. Nobody wanted to be the next name in a report. The fear wasn't of guilt, it was of implication. In Formula One, reputation is everything. A rumor can end a career faster than a mistake ever could. Then came the discovery that changed the tone entirely. During one of the internal audits, a batch of wind tunnel simulations was found duplicated across two directories, one tagged to Norris's profile, another to Piastri's. The results were identical, but the interpretation notes were not. Norris's side had marked the upgrade as viable. Piastri's had labeled it unstable in yaw. Both assessments were valid, but the duplication suggested a lack of central coordination. McLaren's technical unity, once its greatest weapon, was collapsing under its own equality. When Stella saw the report, he reportedly went silent for several seconds before saying quietly, "We're building two McLarens." That moment became the turning point. What began as an investigation into a minor breach had revealed a deeper structural flaw. McLaren was now a team split not just by personalities, but by engineering ideology. Zak Brown tried to spin it as a positive, calling it competitive tension. But inside the factory, engineers knew better. You can't innovate under tension. You can't focus when you're being watched. Every meeting became half technical, half political. Every decision carried emotional weight. The very thing that made McLaren brilliant, its internal collaboration, was now the thing holding it back. And yet, amid the unease, there's a quiet sense of admiration for Stella. He didn't bury the problem. He faced it. His decision to open the investigation, though painful, might be what ultimately saves McLaren. Because in the data, beneath the mistrust, one truth still shines through. The MCL39 remains a masterpiece of potential. If the team can realign, if the engineers can rediscover unity, they could still turn this storm into strength. But that's the gamble. By the time McLaren's charter flight touched down in Austin, the secret was already gone. What had started as a quiet internal review inside Woking had become the biggest story in the paddock. Every journalist, every rival team principal, every driver was suddenly asking the same question: what exactly is McLaren investigating? The official statement remained sterile, just 7 words long: an internal operational matter is being reviewed. But the silence that followed only made the noise louder. Because in Formula One, silence never means stability. It means crisis. Inside the paddock, the rumors spread faster than any engine update. Some said the team had uncovered data tampering. Others whispered about a falling out between engineers loyal to Norris and those aligned with Piastri. The truth, as always, was more complicated. The investigation had not uncovered sabotage, it had uncovered distrust. But by now, perception had already rewritten reality. Headlines called it McLaren's Cold War. One Italian newspaper claimed the team was divided by 2 drivers who no longer trust each other. By Friday morning, the story had reached the FIA. The governing body had no jurisdiction, but the fact that they even asked questions made it official. McLaren's problem was public. Andrea Stella faced the cameras first. Calm, measured, but visibly tired, he repeated the same line 3 times: "We are reviewing internal processes. It's procedural." But the journalists pressed harder. Does it involve the drivers directly? Has trust broken down inside the team? Stella's answers became shorter, his pauses longer. He didn't deny it, and that was all it took. Within an hour, the story dominated every sports outlet from London to Los Angeles. McLaren, once the model of unity, now looked like a team on the verge of implosion. Behind closed doors, the tension exploded. Zak Brown and Andrea Stella, usually aligned, now stood on opposite sides of how to handle the fallout. Brown, ever the media strategist, wanted transparency. He believed that controlling the narrative was better than chasing it. "We own this story, or it owns us," he reportedly told Stella. But Stella refused. "This isn't a PR issue," he said quietly. "It's a trust issue." Brown wanted statements, Stella wanted silence. The result was paralysis, a leadership caught between damage control and damage limitation. Meanwhile, inside the garage, the 2 drivers couldn't avoid the gravity of what was happening. Both had been briefed separately about the investigation weeks earlier, but now, the spotlight made it impossible to ignore. During Thursday's media day, the questions turned personal. Norris, usually relaxed and quick-witted, looked tense. "There's always noise in Formula One," he said, his voice firm but thin. "What matters is what happens on track." Piastri, sitting beside him, was colder. "We're professionals," he said. "The team handles its business. We handle ours. No eye contact. No shared jokes. Just a wall of professionalism so thick it screamed of fracture." That night, McLaren held a private meeting at the team's hospitality suite. Stella, Brown, Norris, and Piastri, the 4 central figures, sat around a long table under dim lights. The conversation, according to one source, was calm but suffocating. Stella outlined the latest findings. There had been no evidence of deliberate wrongdoing, but the investigation had revealed inconsistencies in how information was shared between the 2 garages. It wasn't a crime, but it was enough to justify his concerns. "We're not broken," he told them, "but we're not whole either." Zak Brown tried to end the meeting on optimism: "We move forward as one team." But no one in the room looked convinced. The next morning, more leaks hit the press. An unnamed McLaren staff member claimed that the team is considering internal personnel changes before 2026. Whether true or not, it was dynamite. Social media exploded. Fans speculated that Stella might replace senior engineers or restructure the driver management chain. Within hours, McLaren's communications team was in crisis mode, issuing a second statement calling the rumors baseless. But by then, the damage was done. The story had moved beyond the team's control. What truly broke the calm came later that afternoon, during the second free practice session. Piastri, on a flying lap, found himself behind Norris in Sector 3. The gap closed faster than expected. Piastri lifted slightly, but the timing wasn't perfect. He lost a tenth. Over the radio, his tone was neutral, but the message was pointed: tell Lando to manage gaps properly. A minute later, Norris replied, maybe Oscar should push earlier next time. The exchange was brief, polite, but unmistakable. Two drivers drawing lines in public on live broadcast during an ongoing investigation about internal fairness.